Chapter 2. A Wish I Make. The first finger of light found Benjamin's bed. He turned his face to the wall, enjoying that delicious moment, half awake, half asleep. He sank deep into his feather bed. He pretended it was a great white cloud floating in the sky. Suddenly he felt someone in bed beside him. He turned. Why, it was Jacob. He is tired, thought Benjamin. I shall lie very still. But the harder Benjamin tried to lie still, the more he squirmed, and at last Jacob began to stir too. Is thee awake? Whispered Benjamin. Jacob sat up, startled. Then his face twisted into a shy smile. Sure, he sighed, as if he were sorry about it. Then he snuggled down under the warm covers. Benjamin, he whispered, I make dreams in my sleep. Benjamin wriggled his toes in excitement. Perhaps if he listened to Jacob's dream, then Jacob would listen to his. By Philadelphia, Jacob began, his voice low and full of wonder. By Philadelphia, we see ships building. Soon, I am a man. Soon, big ships I make, just like in my dream. I believe thee will do it, Benjamin remarked politely. Now it was his turn. He sat bolt upright in bed. He forgot that he had dozens of chores to do. Jacob, he blurted out, I dream too, even when I am awake. Yeah? Jacob asked. I dream, said Benjamin very slowly. I dream how someday I will paint pictures. No, exclaimed Jacob, his voice rising. Yes, pictures, repeated Jacob, as he turned the matter over in his mind. Like when deer come out from the woods? Like when it makes down rain and sunshine together? Yes, Jacob, that's it, Benjamin laughed. He could hardly make his voice sound like his own. At last he had said the words. He had said them right out. But by my house, we had 2 pictures, Jacob said proudly. Thee did? Asked Benjamin, unbelieving. Yeah, sure. Jacob, I have never seen a picture. I have only heard my Uncle Phineas of Philadelphia tell of them. Did you never see a picture? No, never. And why is that? There was a long moment of silence. We are Quakers, said Benjamin soberly. Quakers think pictures are needless. Jacob sobered too. He tried to find words to tell Benjamin how sorry he was, but no words came. Then, suddenly, his eyes brightened. I make you a present, he said, as if that would fix everything. Again, there was an uncomfortable silence. It is the kitten I give you, Jacob said at last. Thy little black kitten? Yeah, choked Jacob. It makes easier to know he is by you. Oh, Jacob, I will take good care of him. He shall be our house cat. Never will he have to live in the barns. It wonders me if the kitten forgets Grimalkin. Grimalkin? Repeated Benjamin. Yeah, Grimalkin was his mother. Would thee like to have me name the kitten Grimalkin? Jacob seemed to have trouble in answering. Then the bed began to quiver. Now, Benjamin wished he could think of something comforting to say. He stole a glance at Jacob. But Jacob was not crying. He was shaking with laughter. Ah, Benjamin, he giggled. Grimalkin is a she-cat's name, but the kitten, he don't mind. No, of course not. We'll call him Grimalkin, for his mother. All of a sudden, the inn seemed to come alive. There was the sound of heavy boots in the hall. Horses snorted and whinnied in the courtyard. Voices called back and forth. There were the deep, throaty voices of the Germans. There were the burring voices of the Scottish Irish. But Papa's stately voice boomed above them all as he gave out duties. Samuel, this be the day to sow the marshland with grass seed. John, thee will brand the new bullocks today. Thee, Thomas, will yoke the hogs so they will not stray. Joseph, thee and Benjamin can pry up stones to build a fence along the upland pasture. But Benjamin was not listening. He was sniffing the air as noisily as Papa's hound dogs. The most tantalizing smells were seeping in under the door. Ham and scrapple and eggs frying, pippin apples and cinnamon buns baking, and the steaming fragrance of herb tea. Jacob, shouted Benjamin, on with thy clothes. Both boys leaped out of bed and then burst into laughter. Except for their hats and shoes, they were completely dressed. As Benjamin put on his shoes, he also put on a sober manner. "Begin the day in quiet. Do not raise thy voice," he repeated under his breath. "This morning Papa will not need to remind me." Then he promptly forgot his words as he and Jacob tumbled down the stairs and into the bustling activity of the kitchen. Mama was moving silently and swiftly from fire to table. Benjamin's 4 sisters seemed everywhere at once, filling the salt and sugar boxes, putting chairs and benches in place. Even Jacob's mother was helping. "Benjamin," said Sarah, his oldest sister, "wash thy face at once, then blow on the conch shell. Breakfast is ready." Benjamin was so used to Sarah's chatter that he hardly heard her. He and Jacob were over in the chimney corner on their hands and knees. They were peering into the egg basket in awe. Elmira was still there. And someone had brought in all of her own white kittens. And the black kitten was there too. He was a smart one, snuggled in among all the white kittens for warmth. Benjamin looked up and caught Mama's eye. She smiled first at Benjamin, then at Jacob. "The black kitten will be as strong as any," she said softly. "Now, off to the wash bench." Both boys splashed their faces with cold water. Then they took turns blowing on the conch shell until Mr. West and Benjamin's 4 brothers came in from the woods and fields, and the guests flocked in from wagon shed and courtyard. Papa sat down at the head of the table, straight and proud. In true Quaker fashion, he kept his hat on. It looked as if it had grown there. He waited patiently while his 5 sons and his 20 guests sat down to table. Then he nodded his head in pleasure. He liked to see every chair and stool and bench and chest occupied. His blue eyes wandered over the table and lingered a moment on the cinnamon buns. He smiled in approval. When at last a stillness came over the room, he closed his eyes and folded his hands. For a long time, no sound escaped his parted lips. Benjamin could feel little shivers racing up and down his spine. He hoped his father's voice would tremble and quake until the very roof timbers shook. "Almighty God," the trembling began. At the unexpected quaking sound, Jacob jumped and almost fell off his stool. "Be not frightened," whispered Benjamin. "That is why we are called Quakers." "It is the duty of man," Papa was praying, "to care for all living creatures, large and small. The lowliest creature has a work to do. The wren protects the fruit of the orchard. The barn cat protects the grain. The house cat protects man's food. We thank thee, O Lord, for sparing the life of a plain black kitten." Benjamin opened one eye and looked around the table. His brothers, John, Thomas, Samuel, and Joseph, sat thoughtful and grave, their eyes straight ahead, yet seeing nothing. The heads of the guests were bowed low. Mama and the girls stood behind the table. They were waiting to pour the tea, to refill the serving dishes. Of all the people in the room, only Benjamin let his eyes wander. He watched the wisps of steam rising from the serving bowls. He could almost taste the flavorsome scrapple on his tongue. And just when he thought he could not wait another moment, Papa began to look natural once more. He spoke to the traveler beside him in his regular voice. It was the signal to eat. Immediately, knives and spoons clattered against wooden plates. Meanwhile, over in the rush basket, the kittens squirmed and slept and made small mewing sounds. All too soon, breakfast was over. Whips cracked, axles creaked, ox carts began rumbling out in the inn-yard. Benjamin and Jacob stood over the kittens in an awkward silence. It was Jacob who spoke first. "Benjamin," he said. "Yes?" "A wish I make. You could paint so fine a picture of Grimalkin that anyone could tell it's a cat you paint." Benjamin glanced around quickly to see if anyone had heard. Then their eyes locked. "I make a wish too," he whispered. "One day in Philadelphia, I will find thee building a great sail ship. And I shall set up my easel on the bank, and I shall paint the whole harbor." "Jacob, come, already we go," his mother called. Arm in arm, Jacob and Benjamin walked slowly out of the inn. "Goodbye, Benjamin," said Jacob with a catch in his voice. "I wish you could go with." He looked back over his shoulder toward the inn. "Goodbye, Grimalkin," he said, scarcely above a whisper. Then he let go of Benjamin's arm and took his place alongside his father. Today, he would not climb aboard the wagon. Today, he would help lead the oxen. It was as if he had grown into a man overnight. Slowly, the cart rattled out of the courtyard, past the signboard swinging from the buttonwood tree, past the yapping dogs, and off into the wilderness. Benjamin watched until Jacob and finally the whole cart were swallowed up and lost among the black tree trunks. Then he kicked the upping block to keep from crying.